"You old beggar, a garage suits you best," my son-in-law mocked, flaunting my daughter's $1 million estate in Florida. I smiled, hiding my hurt as he mocked my modest inheritance from my ex-wife. That day, I unlocked the garage door, expecting to see junk, but instead, I found a big secret that shocked me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you were listening in the comments. "Strange seeing you here, Judson." Giles Barry's voice cut through the funeral home's hushed atmosphere like a blade through silk. "Thought after the divorce you'd forget the way to our family." I turned from Beverly's casket, where I'd been standing apart from the main cluster of mourners. The expensive mahogany gleamed under the soft lighting, surrounded by arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Giles approached with that predatory swagger I'd grown to despise, his designer suit a stark contrast to my worn tweed jacket. "I came to pay my final respects," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "We were married for 23 years. His laugh was cold, theatrical. "Yes, until she realized she deserved better." The words hit like a physical blow, but I maintained my composure. Around us, other mourners continued their whispered conversations, the oppressive scent of lilies and roses filling the air. Through the tall windows, Houston traffic hummed past the funeral home, life continuing its relentless pace while we gathered to mourn the dead. Joyce appeared between us, her face strained with grief and embarrassment. "Giles, please. Not today. Mom wouldn't want this." But Giles wasn't finished. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a cruel whisper. "Beverly told me about those last years, Judson. How boring you'd become. How small." His eyes glittered with malicious satisfaction. "She said leaving you was the best decision she ever made." The funeral director's assistant announced that the service would begin in 5 minutes. Mourners began filing into the chapel, their heels clicking against polished floors. I watched them go, these people who had filled Beverly's life, after I was no longer part of it. "Dad, please." Joyce's hand touched my arm gently. "Don't listen to him." I looked at my daughter, seeing Beverly's eyes in her face. "It's all right, sweetheart. Your mother made her choices. We all did." Giles smirked, adjusting his silk tie. "At least she ended up with people who could appreciate what she offered. Not everyone can handle a woman of Beverly's caliber." The chapel doors opened, releasing a surge of cooled air that carried the sound of organ music. Hyman Arnold, Beverly's lawyer, stood near the entrance in his impeccable suit, horn-rimmed glasses reflecting the overhead lights. He watched our exchange with professional detachment, but something in his expression suggested he knew more than he revealed. "Shall we?" Joyce asked, gesturing toward the chapel. Giles straightened his shoulders, every inch the successful real estate broker. "Of course. Family should sit together." His emphasis on family made it clear he didn't include me in that category. I followed them into the chapel, taking a seat several rows behind the family section. The minister began speaking about Beverly's life, her charitable works, her devotion to those she loved. I closed my eyes and remembered a different Beverly, one who had laughed at my terrible jokes and fallen asleep reading architecture magazines while I worked late into the night. When the service ended, I slipped out through a side door while the family received condolences. The Texas afternoon heat struck me like a wall as I walked toward my old Honda in the parking lot. Behind me, I could hear Giles's voice carrying across the asphalt, already discussing dinner plans with other mourners. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the key into the ignition. 24 hours ago, Beverly had been alive in some hospital bed, breathing her last, while I sat unknowing in my kitchen, reading the morning paper. Now she was gone, and Giles's words echoed in my mind. "She said leaving you was the best decision she ever made." The drive home passed in a blur of suburban streets and traffic lights. I pulled into my driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the modest house Beverly had helped me choose 30 years ago. The roses we'd planted together had grown wild along the fence, unpruned and chaotic. Inside, the silence felt profound. I hung my jacket carefully in the closet and walked to the kitchen, where the morning's coffee cup still sat beside yesterday's newspaper. Beverly's obituary was there on page B6, complete with a photograph from 10 years ago, her smile radiant and confident. I was reaching for the phone to call Joyce when it rang, startling me. 2 days had passed since the funeral, and I still couldn't shake Giles' words. I sat at my kitchen table with a simple breakfast of toast and coffee, staring at the newspaper's obituary section without really reading. The empty chair across from me seemed larger than usual, reminding me of the Sunday mornings when Beverly would visit after Joyce was born, back when we still attempted civility. The phone rang at exactly 10:30, interrupting my wandering thoughts. "Mr. Willis, this is Hyman Arnold, Mrs. Matthews' attorney. I apologize for disturbing you during this difficult time." I set down my coffee cup, confused. "Mr. Arnold, how can I help you?" "I need you to attend the reading of Mrs. Matthews' will tomorrow at 2 p.m. Can you make it to my office downtown?" Will reading? I almost laughed at the absurdity. "But, Mr. Arnold, Beverly and I have been divorced for 15 years. Surely there's been some mistake. Nevertheless, you are specifically mentioned in the document. Please don't be late." His tone was professionally neutral, revealing nothing. "The address is 1247 Main Street, 32nd floor." The line went dead before I could ask any questions. I sat holding the silent phone, completely bewildered. Why would Beverly include me in her will? We'd divided everything cleanly during the divorce proceedings. She'd taken the house, the investments, her family money. I'd kept my pension, this smaller house, and my dignity. What could she possibly have left me? Walking through my quiet home, I touched familiar objects that Beverly had once chosen with me. The ceramic bowl on the kitchen counter where we used to keep car keys. The brass lamp in the living room that she'd insisted would give better reading light. Everything here carried echoes of our shared past, even 15 years after she'd walked away. In the bedroom closet, behind my winter coats, I found the shoebox where I kept old photographs. I hadn't opened it in months, maybe years. But something about Arnold's mysterious call compelled me to carry it to the living room. The first photo showed our wedding day. Beverly radiant in white silk, her face glowing with happiness I'd thought would last forever. We looked so young, so certain of our future together. I was 35 then, she was 30. Both of us believing we had decades of shared tomorrows ahead. Another picture captured us in the garden, planting the roses that now grew wild outside my window. Beverly's hands were dirty with soil, her hair falling loose from its ponytail, as she laughed at something I'd said. I remembered that day perfectly. We'd argued about whether to plant red or yellow roses, finally deciding on both. Why would Beverly mention me? I wondered aloud, my voice echoing in the empty room. The afternoon light shifted through the windows as I continued through the photographs. There were pictures from vacations to the Gulf Coast, Beverly's 50th birthday party, Joyce's high school graduation, where we'd stood together one last time, as a married couple, though the divorce papers had already been filed. I found myself studying a photo from our 20th anniversary, just 3 years before everything fell apart. We were at that expensive restaurant downtown, Beverly wearing the emerald necklace I'd saved months to buy. She looked happy, but I could see something in her eyes now that I'd missed then, a restlessness, a searching quality that should have warned me. Maybe Giles was right. Maybe she had deserved better than what I could offer. I'd been a good architect, made decent money, loved her completely. But perhaps that wasn't enough for a woman who'd inherited more money than I'd ever see, who moved in circles I never quite felt comfortable joining. The phone rang again, startling me from my memories. This time, it was Joyce. "Dad, I wanted to check on you after what happened at the funeral." Giles was out of line. "It's all right, sweetheart. People say things when they're grieving. That's not an excuse." Her voice carried an edge I rarely heard. "Mom wouldn't have wanted him to treat you that way." I looked at the photographs scattered around me, evidence of a life that once seemed unbreakable. "Joyce, did your mother ever did she ever say anything about her will, about including me in any way?" There was a pause. "No, Dad. Why would you ask?" "Her lawyer called. I'm supposed to attend the reading tomorrow." "That's strange. I mean, you two settled everything in the divorce, right?" "That's what I thought." I gathered the photos back into their box, suddenly feeling foolish for dwelling in the past. "I'm sure it's just some formality. Maybe she left me her collection of my architectural drawings or something sentimental." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Beverly had been nothing if not practical in her final years. Everything she did had purpose, calculation. If she'd included me in her will after 15 years of minimal contact, there was a reason. After Joyce hung up, I made myself a simple lunch and tried to read, but my mind kept returning to tomorrow's appointment. What could Beverly possibly have left me? Money seemed unlikely. She'd never been sentimental about financial matters. Her jewelry would go to Joyce. her properties to the family trust. As evening approached, I found myself standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the overgrown roses. The sun cast long shadows across the yard, and somewhere in the distance, a neighbor was grilling dinner, the smoke drifting across the suburban landscape. Tomorrow, I would learn what Beverly Matthews had decided I deserved after all these years. The photo box sat open on my coffee table as afternoon shadows lengthened across the living room floor. I settled into my reading chair with a cup of tea, something I rarely did these days, and let myself sink deeper into the memories that Arnold's call had stirred up. I picked up a photograph from our honeymoon at Galveston. Beverly's hair wild from the Gulf breeze, her face flushed with sunburn and joy. We'd driven down in my old Buick, windows down, singing along to the radio like teenagers. She'd made me stop at every roadside antique shop, collecting bits of colored glass and vintage postcards. "Look at this one, Judson," she'd said, holding up a blue bottle that caught the sunlight. "Isn't it perfect?" Everything was perfect to her then. Even my terrible jokes about the tourist traps we visited. That Beverly seemed like a different person from the woman who had eventually grown restless in our comfortable life. I traced my finger along the photograph's edge, remembering how she used to curl against me in bed, planning our future with the enthusiasm of someone who believed in fairy tales. The change had been gradual, so subtle I'd missed the warning signs. It started around our 20th year of marriage, when Beverly inherited a substantial sum from her aunt. Suddenly she had access to social circles I'd never been part of. Charity galas, art openings, country club events where the men wore Rolex watches and discussed investments I couldn't fathom. I found a picture from that period, Beverly in an evening gown at some fundraiser, radiant and confident. I was beside her in my one good tuxedo, looking uncomfortable and out of place. That night, she'd introduced me to Richard Pemberton, a real estate developer with silver hair and perfect teeth, who made his fortune buying up downtown properties. "Judson's an architect," Beverly had said, her hand on my arm. "He designed the most beautiful houses when we were younger." Richard had smiled politely, but I saw how his eyes lingered on Beverly, how she laughed just a little too brightly at his stories. Even then, I should have known. The discovery came on a Tuesday morning in October 2010. I'd forgotten my blueprints and returned home unexpectedly to find Richard's silver Mercedes in our driveway. The front door was unlocked, and I could hear voices from the living room, Beverly's laugh mixing with his deeper tones in a way that made my stomach clench. I stood in my own hallway like an intruder, listening to them discuss plans for a weekend trip to Austin, their voices intimate and familiar. When Beverly appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing her silk robe at 11 in the morning, she didn't even look surprised to see me. "Judson?" She said my name like she was acknowledging a delivery man. "We need to talk." Richard emerged behind her, fully dressed but rumpled, his confidence intact even in such circumstances. "I should go," he said, kissing Beverly's cheek with casual possession. "I'll call you later about those dinner reservations." He nodded at me politely as he left, as if we'd just concluded a business meeting. "How long?" I asked when we were alone. Beverly poured herself coffee with steady hands. 6 months, maybe longer. Does it matter? 23 years of marriage, and you ask if it matters? She turned to face me then, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, not guilt or shame, but a kind of defiant relief. "Judson, I've been suffocating in this life. You're a good man, but I want more than good. I want exciting, sophisticated, alive." "More of what, Beverly? I gave you everything I could." "I know you did. That's what makes this so difficult." She sat at our kitchen table, in the chair where she'd planned 1,000 meals, organized Joyce's school events, balanced our checkbooks. "Richard understands parts of me you never saw. He moves in my world naturally." I sat across from her, studying the woman I'd loved for over 2 decades. And what world is that? The one where marriage vows don't matter? Where loyalty is just another word for boredom? "Don't be cruel, Judson." "Cruel?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I come home to find my wife with another man, and I'm being cruel by asking questions?" Beverly's composure cracked slightly. "It just happened. I didn't plan this, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep living this small, predictable life when there's so much more out there." I looked around our kitchen, at the morning sunlight streaming through windows we'd chosen together, at the ceramic rooster Beverly had brought back from a weekend trip to Fredericksburg. Everything seemed smaller suddenly, ordinary in a way I'd never noticed. "So, what happens now?" I asked. "I want a divorce. Richard and I are serious about each other, and I won't live a lie anymore." She reached across the table, but I pulled my hands away. "I'm sorry, Judson. I really am. But I can't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore." The divorce proceedings moved quickly. Beverly was generous with the financial settlement, perhaps from guilt or simply to expedite the process. I kept this house, my pension, and enough savings to live comfortably. She kept everything else, the downtown house, her inheritance, her new life with Richard. Our final conversation took place in the lawyer's office, all cold professionalism and signed papers. As we gathered our copies of the decree, Beverly looked at me with something that might have been regret. "I hope you find happiness, Judson. You deserve someone who can love the life you want to live." I wanted to tell her that I'd loved the life we'd built together, that I'd thought she had too. But the papers were signed, and there was nothing left to say. Now, 15 years later, I closed the photo box and walked to the kitchen window. The roses we'd planted were still there, wild and unpruned, but somehow still blooming. The late afternoon sun slanted across the yard, and I could smell someone grilling dinner nearby. The ordinary perfume of suburban life that Beverly had found so stifling. Tomorrow, I would learn what she'd decided I deserved after all these years of separation. Tonight, I would try to understand why a woman who'd left me for a more exciting life would remember me in her final moments. I made a simple dinner and settled in to watch the evening news, trying not to speculate about tomorrow's revelation. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I stood before my bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of my best white shirt. The reflection showed a man who had aged gracefully despite the heartbreak, silver hair neatly combed, lines around my eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. My hands moved with deliberate care as I selected the navy tie Beverly had given me for our 20th anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. In the kitchen, I brewed coffee stronger than usual and made toast with the precision of a man preparing for battle. The morning newspaper lay folded beside my plate, Beverly's obituary still visible on the back page. Her photograph smiled at me from between advertisements for lawn services and estate sales. "Well, Beverly," I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty kitchen. "Let's see what you've got planned for today." At exactly 12:30, I locked my front door and walked to the driveway where my Honda waited. The car had seen better years, like its owner, but it ran reliably and asked for nothing more than basic maintenance. I adjusted the rear-view mirror and typed Arnold's downtown address into my phone's GPS. The drive through Houston took 45 minutes in midday traffic. I passed familiar neighborhoods where I'd designed houses decades ago, their rooflines still bearing my architectural signature. The radio played softly, a jazz station that Beverly used to favor during our Sunday drives. Downtown's glass towers grew larger as I approached the business district. Finding parking proved challenging until I located a metered spot 3 blocks from Arnold's building. I fed quarters into the machine, calculating I'd need 2 hours maximum for whatever Beverly had orchestrated. Walking those 3 blocks, I noticed other people heading to similar appointments, families dressed in funeral attire, carrying manila folders, the universal uniform of inheritance meetings. Some looked expectant, others worried. A few appeared resigned to disappointment. The law office occupied the 32nd floor of a gleaming tower that made my modest suburban home seem even smaller by comparison. In the elevator, I shared space with 2 other families, their hushed conversations about what mother intended and fair distribution, creating an atmosphere of nervous anticipation. Arnold's receptionist, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, greeted me professionally. "Mr. Willis, please take a seat. The Wagner family is already here." Joyce sat in a leather chair near the windows, wearing a conservative black dress that made her look older than her 38 years. Her eyes were slightly red from recent tears, but she managed a genuine smile when she saw me. "Dad, you look good. How are things holding up?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart. How are you managing after your mother's funeral?" Before she could answer, the elevator chimed, and Giles strode into the reception area with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. His tailored suit probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 3 years. Diamond cufflinks caught the afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. "Judson?" He nodded curtly, then kissed Joyce's cheek with theatrical affection. "Traffic was murder coming from the Heights. I hope we haven't kept Mr. Arnold waiting." Joyce stood, smoothing her dress nervously. "We're actually a few minutes early. Dad just arrived too." Giles checked his Rolex, a gesture that seemed more about displaying wealth than telling time. "Curious what old Beverly had in store for us today? Hopefully not some outstanding debts we don't know about." He laughed at his own joke, but his eyes carried a calculating gleam. The inner office door opened, and Hyman Arnold appeared in his perfectly pressed suit, horn-rimmed glasses reflecting the overhead lights. His expression revealed nothing, maintaining the professional neutrality that had made him Beverly's trusted advisor for 20 years. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your punctuality. Please, come into the conference room." We filed through mahogany doors into a space that spoke of old money and established power. A polished table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Legal books lined the walls, their gold-embossed titles catching light from crystal chandeliers. Arnold gestured toward specific seats, arranging us like players on a chessboard. He took his position at the head of the table, manila folders arranged with military precision before him. The afternoon sun slanted through Venetian blinds, creating patterns of light and shadow across the proceedings. "Before we begin," Arnold said, removing his glasses to clean them slowly, "I want you to know that Mrs. Matthews spent considerable time crafting these provisions. Every decision was deliberate and carefully considered." Joyce reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Whatever happens, Dad, I'm glad you're here." Giles leaned back in his chair, projecting the casual confidence of someone accustomed to favorable outcomes. "Beverly always was thorough about financial matters. I'm sure she's taken care of everyone appropriately." Arnold replaced his glasses and opened the top folder with ceremony. "Shall we proceed with the reading of Beverly Matthews's last will and testament?" Arnold cleared his throat and began with the formal language that transforms private grief into legal procedure. "By the last will and testament of Beverly Matthews, deceased, dated February 14th, 2025, I hereby distribute her worldly possessions as follows." The conference room fell silent except for the distant hum of Houston traffic 32 floors below. Joyce folded her hands in her lap, while Giles drummed his manicured fingers against the mahogany table. I sat motionless, still wondering why I belonged in this room at all. "To my beloved daughter Joyce Wagner," Arnold continued, his voice carrying the weight of official pronouncement, "I bequeath my oceanfront house at 847 Collins Avenue, Miami Beach, Florida, including all furnishings, artwork, and associated properties." Joyce's breath caught audibly. "The Miami house? But Mom, that's worth—" She trailed off, tears filling her eyes. "The property is valued at approximately $2.3 million, Arnold noted professionally. "All transfer documents have been prepared, and the keys are here." He slid a small manila envelope across the table to Joyce, who accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered, clutching the envelope to her chest. "I can't believe she—" "Thank you." Giles's expression shifted subtly, his confidence flickering as he performed quick mental calculations. $2.3 million was substantial, but split between Joyce and whatever other beneficiaries remained, his expected windfall might be smaller than anticipated. Arnold consulted his next document, adjusting his glasses with deliberate precision. "And to Judson Willis, my former husband, I leave the garage located at 1247 Old Creek Road, Houston, Texas, including all contents therein." The words hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished candle. "A garage?" I blinked in genuine confusion. I didn't even know Beverly owned property on Old Creek Road. Arnold's expression remained professionally neutral. "The address and key are enclosed." He passed me a simple white envelope containing a single key and a slip of paper, with an address written in Beverly's familiar handwriting. Joyce looked from the envelope in my hands to the substantial packet of documents she'd received. The disparity was obvious and uncomfortable. "Mom left Dad a garage while I get a multi-million-dollar house? That appears to be the extent of your inheritances," Arnold confirmed, gathering the remaining papers. "Mrs. Matthews was very specific about these bequests. The garage property has been in her name for approximately 8 years. Giles couldn't contain his bewilderment any longer. "A garage? What could possibly be stored in some old shed? Tools Beverly didn't want cluttering her mansion? Maybe some garden equipment or Christmas decorations." I examined the key, small, silver, worn from use. The address meant nothing to me, though Old Creek Road was only a few miles from my house. When did Beverly acquire this property, and why would she leave it to me? I'm not privy to Mrs. Matthews' motivations, Arnold replied carefully. I can only execute her wishes as stated in the document. Joyce reached across to touch my arm. Dad, I'm sorry. This seems so unfair after everything you and Mom shared. Don't apologize, sweetheart. Your mother made her decisions for reasons that made sense to her. I pocketed the key and address slip, trying to process this unexpected development. I'm happy you received something meaningful. Giles studied his wife's inheritance documents with barely concealed frustration. Through Joyce's property, he'd expected to benefit substantially, but a garage hardly qualified as significant wealth. Well, at least the house is substantial. We can probably rent it out for good income, maybe spend holidays there ourselves. Arnold began organizing his papers with the efficiency of a man concluding routine business. All necessary transfer documents are included in your packets. Mrs. Matthews has also covered all associated taxes and legal fees. You're both free to take possession immediately. Immediately? I asked. The garage is legally yours as of today, Mr. Willis. The previous arrangements have been terminated. We sat in momentary silence, processing the strange symmetry of Beverly's final gesture. A multi-million-dollar house for the daughter she adored. A mysterious garage for the husband she'd abandoned 15 years ago. Whatever logic drove these decisions remained locked in Beverly's mind, carried with her to the grave. Arnold stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. If there are no further questions, I believe our business here is complete. Congratulations to you both. Joyce gathered her documents carefully, still somewhat dazed by the magnitude of her inheritance. Giles helped her organize the papers, his mind clearly working through financial implications and future possibilities. I slipped the garage key into my jacket pocket, feeling its weight against my chest. Somewhere across town, in a location I'd never visited, Beverly had left me something she considered worthy of inheritance. Whether it represented forgiveness, guilt, or simply the disposal of unwanted property remained to be discovered. Shall we head out? Giles asked, checking his Rolex once more. I've got a 4 o'clock appointment back in the Heights. We rose from our chairs, gathering personal belongings and preparing to return to our separate lives. But as we moved toward the conference room door, I couldn't shake the feeling that Beverly's story wasn't quite finished. The elevator carried us down in relative silence, each lost in private thoughts about inheritance, fairness, and the strange ways people choose to be remembered. The elevator deposited us into the gleaming lobby where afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. Joyce walked between Giles and me as we headed toward the street, her substantial inheritance documents secured in a leather portfolio that Arnold's secretary had provided. That went better than expected, Giles said, his voice carrying forced optimism. 2.3 million is nothing to sneeze at, even if we weren't expecting. He glanced at me, apparently remembering my modest garage inheritance. Joyce stopped near the building's entrance, turning to face me with concern evident in her eyes. Dad, I still feel terrible about the disparity. Maybe when we sell Mom's house I could— Absolutely not, I interrupted gently. Your mother left you that property for good reasons. You deserve every square foot of it. We pushed through the heavy glass doors onto Houston's downtown sidewalk. The afternoon heat hit us immediately, that oppressive humidity that makes suits stick to skin and forces hurried walks to air-conditioned destinations. Where did you park? Joyce asked, adjusting her purse strap against her shoulder. 3 blocks that way. I pointed toward the meter where my Honda waited. You too? Giles gestured vaguely toward a nearby parking garage. Valet service at the Marriott. No point walking in this heat when you don't have to. We began moving in opposite directions, the natural conclusion to an awkward family gathering. But Giles stopped abruptly, turning back toward me with an expression I'd seen before, that predatory look he'd worn at Beverly's funeral. Actually, Judson, I've been thinking about your inheritance. His voice carried a tone of mock concern. A garage seems like such an odd choice for Beverly, almost like she was making some kind of statement. Joyce paused, sensing the shift in her husband's demeanor. Giles, what are you getting at? But Giles was focused entirely on me now, closing the distance between us with deliberate steps. Other pedestrians flowed around us, downtown professionals hurrying toward their next appointments. But I felt suddenly isolated on the busy sidewalk. I mean, let's be honest about what we're dealing with here, Giles continued, his smile taking on a cruel edge. Joyce inherits oceanfront property worth millions, and you get, what, some storage shed where Beverly kept her garden tools? Giles, please, Joyce warned, her voice tight with embarrassment. No, I think this is worth discussing. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne mixed with the scent of his leather briefcase. Well, Judson, got exactly what you deserved, didn't you? The garage suits you perfectly, you old beggar. The words hit like a physical blow, delivered with theatrical volume that caught the attention of passing strangers. Several people slowed their pace, witnessing what was clearly a family conflict playing out on a public sidewalk. Thank you for your honesty, Giles, I replied quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. What could possibly be in that old shed anyway? He laughed loudly, gesturing toward my jacket pocket where the garage key rested. Junk that Beverly didn't want cluttering up her mansion? Maybe some rusty lawn equipment or Christmas decorations from the 1980s? Joyce stepped between us, her face flushed with anger and mortification. Stop it. Both of you, just stop. Dad, I'm so sorry. Giles, you're being cruel and inappropriate. I'm being realistic, Giles shot back, but he took a step backward. Your father walked away from your mother's funeral with nothing, and now he's got some worthless storage building. At least Beverly was consistent in her assessment of his value. The sidewalk seemed to tilt beneath my feet. In my peripheral vision, I noticed a well-dressed couple slowing their pace to listen, their faces showing the uncomfortable fascination that public humiliation always attracts. A delivery truck rumbled past, its diesel engine drowning out the sounds of normal city life. I reached into my jacket pocket and touched the garage key, small, warm from my body heat, somehow heavier than it should have been. Whatever Beverly had left me, whatever statement she'd intended to make, Giles had just ensured that I would discover it with particular attention to detail. You're absolutely right, Giles, I said calmly, pulling my hand away from the key. Beverly always was practical about value and worth. Joyce was near tears now, caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her father. Dad, please don't listen to him. Mom wouldn't have wanted this. Your mother knew exactly what she was doing, I replied, looking directly at Giles. She always did. Giles straightened his tie and checked his watch with the satisfaction of someone who believed he'd won an important victory. Well, this has been enlightening, but I really do have that appointment. Joyce, we should head to the car. He turned and began walking toward the parking garage with the confident stride of a man who'd successfully established his dominance. Joyce hesitated, torn between following her husband and staying with me. Go ahead, sweetheart, I told her gently. I'll talk to you soon. She kissed my cheek quickly, whispering, I love you, Dad, before hurrying to catch up with Giles's retreating figure. I stood alone on the downtown sidewalk, watching them disappear into the shadows of the parking garage. Around me, Houston continued its relentless pace, cars honking, pedestrians rushing, the city grinding forward without pause for one old man's humiliation. But something had changed in those few minutes. The garage key felt different in my pocket now, not like a consolation prize or a gesture of pity, but like a key to something important. Beverly had known Giles for 8 years, had watched him treat me with barely concealed contempt at family gatherings. Whatever waited for me at 1247 Old Creek Road, I was suddenly very eager to discover it. Evening settled over my quiet neighborhood as I cleared the dinner dishes from my small kitchen table. The garage key lay beside my empty coffee cup, catching the overhead light each time I moved past it. 5 hours had passed since Giles's sidewalk humiliation, and the sting of his words hadn't faded. I'd spent the afternoon trying to read, but my mind kept returning to that moment when he'd called me old beggar in front of strangers. The phrase echoed through my house like an unwelcome visitor, settling into corners where Beverly's memory still lingered. The phone rang at exactly 7:30, startling me from my brooding. Mr. Willis, this is Hyman Arnold. I apologize for disturbing you this evening. I set down the dish towel, immediately alert. No trouble at all, Mr. Arnold. What's the matter? I have an unusual request. His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard during the formal will reading. When you visit the garage, and I'm confident you'll do so soon, please call me immediately afterward. Call you? Is there something wrong with the paperwork? The paperwork is perfectly in order. Arnold paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. It's just that Mrs. Matthews left very specific instructions regarding your inheritance. She was quite insistent that I speak with you after your first visit. I pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, studying the garage key with new interest. What kind of instructions? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but she was very concerned that you understand the full significance of what she's left you. The formal language couldn't hide something else in Arnold's tone: anticipation, maybe even excitement carefully held in check. I found a pen and pulled over a notepad. "Give me your direct number," I said. "I'll visit the garage tomorrow morning." "Excellent. My private line is 713-555-0147. I'll be available any time after you've had a chance to explore the property." There was something deliberate about the way he said explore, as if the word carried more weight than its usual meaning. "Mr. Arnold, can you at least tell me why Beverly owned a garage on Old Creek Road? I had no idea she'd acquired property there." "Mrs. Matthews made the purchase approximately 8 years ago. She never mentioned it to family members because she considered it a very personal investment." 8 years ago. I counted backward. That would have been 2017, well into her marriage with Richard Pemberton. Why would a woman living in luxury suddenly acquire storage space in an industrial district? Was it expensive? The garage, I mean. Arnold's chuckle sounded oddly strained. Cost was never Mrs. Matthews' primary concern when she felt something was important. She was very specific about wanting you to have that particular property. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, holding both the garage key and Arnold's phone number. The evening news played softly on my small television. But I wasn't listening. Beverly had planned something, that much was clear. The question was what and why she'd felt the need to involve her lawyer in such an elaborate way. I walked to the window and looked out toward the direction of Old Creek Road, though I couldn't see it from here. Somewhere across town, in a building I'd never visited, my ex-wife had left me something she considered significant enough to require legal supervision. Giles's mocking words came back to me. What could possibly be in that old shed? Junk that Beverly didn't want cluttering up her mansion? Maybe he was right. Maybe the garage held nothing but forgotten possessions and the detritus of a life I'd once shared. But Arnold's carefully measured excitement suggested otherwise. I set my alarm clock for 7 a.m., earlier than my usual schedule. Whatever Beverly had planned, whatever message she'd intended to send, I would discover it first thing tomorrow morning. The garage key felt warm in my palm as I prepared for bed, and I found myself looking forward to the morning with an anticipation I hadn't felt in years. My Honda's engine turned over smoothly in the morning air, a reliable sound that had become as familiar as my own heartbeat. The garage key sat on the passenger seat beside Arnold's carefully written phone number, both items seeming to pulse with significance in the early sunlight. GPS directions led me through neighborhoods I rarely visited, away from my comfortable suburban routine toward Houston's industrial corridor. The drive would take 45 minutes through morning traffic, giving me plenty of time to think about what I might find. Beverly had purchased the garage 8 years ago, Arnold said. That timing bothered me. 2017 was when Joyce announced her engagement to Giles, when family gatherings became exercises in subtle hostility masked as politeness. I'd watched my daughter's fiancé assess our modest home with calculating eyes, making mental inventories of things that might someday become his through marriage. "Giles is a good man, Dad. He takes care of me." Joyce had defended him when I'd expressed mild reservations about their quick engagement. "The main thing is that you're happy, sweetheart," I'd replied, swallowing my concerns. But had she been happy? Looking back through 8 years of holiday dinners and birthday celebrations, I could see signs I'd ignored at the time. Joyce's growing quiet during Giles's stories about successful real estate deals. The way she'd change subjects when he started calculating the future value of inherited property. Small gestures of control disguised as caring. At a gas station near the halfway point, I stopped for coffee and directions. The attendant, a young man with oil-stained coveralls, confirmed that Old Creek Road was indeed in the industrial district. "Lots of small warehouses and repair shops," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your garage in that area?" "Apparently so. I inherited it recently." "Well, that part of town's been gentrifying. Property values going up. Might be worth more than you think." I thanked him and returned to my car, where Joyce's graduation photo smiled at me from the dashboard. She'd looked so confident that day in her cap and gown, ready to conquer the world with her computer science degree. When had that confidence started wearing thin under her husband's constant financial planning? Traffic thinned as I entered the industrial district. Strip malls gave way to warehouses, fast food restaurants to auto repair shops. The GPS directed me through a maze of streets lined with practical buildings designed for function rather than beauty. My kind of architecture, actually. Giles. Something about him bothered me from the beginning, I admitted to myself aloud. It wasn't just his obvious interest in Beverly's money, though that was certainly part of it. There was something calculating in the way he approached relationships, as if people were investments to be managed rather than loved. I remembered their wedding day, walking Joyce down the aisle while questions I couldn't voice churned in my stomach. Giles's smile that day had seemed more triumphant than loving, as if he'd successfully completed a business acquisition rather than married the woman he adored. But is she happy? I wondered now, navigating the final turn toward Old Creek Road. Did my daughter make a mistake? The question had been gnawing at me for months, especially after watching Giles's performance at Beverly's funeral and yesterday's will reading. His mask had slipped enough to show the ugliness underneath, the casual cruelty he was capable of when things didn't go his way. Old Creek Road stretched before me, a mixture of small manufacturing buildings and storage facilities. Numbers climbed steadily. 1201, 1215, 1231. Whatever Beverly had left me was just ahead, waiting to provide answers to questions I was only beginning to understand. I slowed the car, searching for 1247, and found myself hoping that whatever lay behind that garage door would help me understand not just Beverly's final intentions, but also how to protect the daughter we'd both loved from a man who saw her primarily as a path to wealth. The building appeared ahead, modest and unremarkable, exactly the kind of place Giles would dismiss as worthless. But Beverly had chosen it for a reason, and after 45 minutes of reflection, I was beginning to suspect that reason had everything to do with the man who'd called me old beggar on a Houston sidewalk. My car door slammed shut with a metallic echo that seemed too loud in the quiet industrial area. The garage stood before me, a single-story concrete block building that looked every bit as unremarkable as Giles had suggested. Weathered but not abandoned, functional rather than beautiful. The kind of structure I might have designed myself in my practical years. I locked the Honda and walked slowly toward the building, taking in details with the trained eye of a retired architect. The construction was solid, probably built in the 1980s when this part of Houston was expanding rapidly. A metal roll-up door dominated the front, showing surface rust but no structural damage. Small windows had been painted over from the inside, preventing any preview of contents. "Well, Beverly," I said aloud, my voice carrying in the still air, "let's see what you left me." Adjacent buildings housed an auto repair shop and a small electronics warehouse, both closed at this hour. The isolation was perfect for whatever Beverly had planned. No curious neighbors, no accidental witnesses to whatever revelation awaited inside. I walked completely around the garage, noting details that might matter. The building was larger than it appeared from the front, probably 20 by 30 feet. Security consisted of a single heavy-duty padlock that seemed oddly expensive for such a modest structure. The lock mechanism worked smoothly despite the door's rusty appearance, suggesting recent maintenance. At the back of the building, a small service door bore a matching lock. No obvious damage, no signs of break-ins or vandalism. Whatever Beverly had stored here, she'd protected it well. The morning Texas heat was already building, warming the concrete under my feet and making my shirt stick to my back. Industrial sounds drifted from nearby buildings, the whir of machinery, the distant rumble of delivery trucks. Normal working day sounds that made this moment feel both ordinary and extraordinary. I returned to the front door and pulled Arnold's phone number from my jacket pocket, checking to make sure I could reach him quickly. His strange urgency last night suggested that whatever I found would require immediate discussion. The garage key felt substantial in my palm, heavier than it should have been for such a simple piece of metal. I'd been carrying it since yesterday's will reading, through Giles's public humiliation, through Arnold's mysterious phone call, through 45 minutes of morning reflection. Now it was time to discover what Beverly Matthews had considered important enough to bequeath to the husband she'd left 15 years ago. Giles is probably right, I muttered, testing the key against the lock. "Just old junk in here." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Arnold's barely contained excitement, Beverly's specific instructions, the 8-year timeline that coincided with Giles entering our family, everything pointed to something more significant than discarded furniture. The key slid into the padlock with a satisfying click. The mechanism turned smoothly, decades of architectural experience telling me that this lock was much newer and better maintained than the door it secured. I paused with my hand on the lock, suddenly aware that whatever lay beyond this threshold would change something fundamental. Beverly had been many things: unfaithful wife, distant ex-spouse, complicated mother, but she'd never been careless with her gestures. If she'd left me this garage, if she'd involved Arnold in such an elaborate revelation, there was a reason that went far beyond simple inheritance. The lock opened completely, hanging loose in my grip. I set it carefully aside and grasped the door's handle, feeling the weight of metal warmed by morning sun. Behind me, Houston continued its relentless pace, traffic humming on distant highways, the city grinding forward without pause. But here, in this quiet industrial corner, time seemed suspended at the moment before revelation. I began to pull the garage door upward, the mechanism moving more smoothly than expected. Light spilled into the interior, revealing shadows that hinted at shapes I couldn't quite identify. My breath caught in my throat as the door rose higher, exposing contents that made absolutely no sense in the context of Beverly's modest bequest. Whatever I had expected to find, this wasn't it. The garage door rolled completely open with a mechanical rumble that seemed to announce something momentous. Sunlight poured into the space, illuminating what appeared to be a vehicle covered by a fitted protective tarp. But the shape underneath suggested something far more elegant than the rusty lawn equipment Giles had predicted. I stepped inside, my eyes adjusting to the interior lighting. This wasn't the cluttered storage space I'd expected. The concrete floor was clean, almost spotless. Tool cabinets lined one wall with professional organization. Climate control equipment hummed quietly in the corner, maintaining perfect temperature and humidity. My hand found a light switch near the door. Fluorescent fixtures flickered to life, revealing the full scope of what Beverly had left me. The covered vehicle dominated the center space, but everything around it spoke of careful maintenance and considerable expense. I approached the tarp slowly, noting its high-quality construction. This wasn't a cheap hardware store cover. It was custom-fitted, made from materials designed to protect something valuable. The shape underneath grew more intriguing with each step. Low, sleek lines, classic proportions. Definitely an automobile, but nothing like the pickup trucks and sedans common to this industrial neighborhood. "What did you do, Beverly?" I whispered, grasping a corner of the protective cover. The fabric lifted easily, revealing a glimpse of red paint that gleamed like fresh blood in the fluorescent lighting. Not the flat red of a work truck or the metallic burgundy of a modern sedan, but something deeper, richer, racing red. I pulled the cover back further, exposing chrome bumpers and wire wheels that belonged to a different era entirely. My architectural eye immediately recognized the precision of the design, every curve deliberate, every line flowing into the next with mathematical perfection. The front grille emerged as I continued lifting the tarp, revealing the prancing horse logo that made my hands freeze in mid-motion. "Holy... This is a Ferrari," I breathed, staring at the familiar emblem. But not just any Ferrari. As more of the car revealed itself, I recognized the distinctive profile of something legendary. Short wheelbase, competition-bred lines, the proportions that every automotive designer since had tried to emulate but never quite matched. I dropped the cover completely, stepping backward to take in the full sight. This is a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT SWB. The words came out as barely a whisper, but in the silence of the garage, they sounded like a shout. The car sat before me in pristine condition, its Rosso Corsa paint reflecting the overhead lights like liquid fire. Chrome wire wheels gleamed without a spot of rust. Black leather interior visible through spotless windows showed the patina of age without wear. Everything about it screamed authenticity, quality, and astronomical value. I walked slowly around the vehicle, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. These cars, I knew from hobby magazines and auction reports, sold for millions of dollars, not thousands, millions. This single automobile was worth more than most people's houses. more than Beverly's Miami Beach property that had so impressed Giles yesterday. "This is impossible," I said aloud, running my hand along the perfectly smooth fender. "These cars cost—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The number was too large, too ridiculous. But here it was, sitting in a modest Houston garage, bequeathed to me by the woman who had left me 15 years ago for someone more exciting. A folder on the nearby workbench caught my attention. Inside, I found documentation that confirmed my eyes weren't deceiving me. Original sales receipts, maintenance records stretching back years, insurance policies listing values that made me dizzy, and ownership papers, freshly notarized, bearing my name. The car keys hung on a hook near the driver's door, positioned exactly where someone would expect to find them. Beverly had thought of everything. I opened the driver's door and slid into the leather seat, inhaling the intoxicating mixture of vintage interior and careful preservation. The steering wheel felt perfect in my hands, wood and chrome crafted by artisans who understood that automobiles could be art. On the passenger seat lay an envelope with my name written in Beverly's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up, suddenly understanding that this incredible machine was only part of her final message. Whatever she had written would explain not just the gift, but the years of separation, the pain of betrayal, and perhaps the love that had persisted despite everything. The Ferrari's interior embraced me like a promise of adventures yet to come, but Beverly's letter held the key to understanding why she had chosen this particular way to say goodbye. I held Beverly's envelope with hands that still trembled from the shock of discovery. The Ferrari's leather seats cradled me in luxury I'd never experienced, while afternoon light streamed through the open garage door, warming both the car and my face. Everything felt surreal, like a dream from which I might wake to find myself back in my modest kitchen, with nothing but a simple garage key. The envelope opened carefully under my touch. Beverly's handwriting flowed across expensive stationery, each word formed with the precision she'd always brought to important communications. "Dear Judson," the letter began, "I know I have no right to ask forgiveness after what I did to you, to us, to the life we built together. But I hope this gift will help you understand that my love for you never truly died, even when my actions said otherwise." I paused, looking around the Ferrari's interior, then continued reading. "This car is not just a gift. It's a symbol of those happy years we spent together, the dreams we shared, and the man you always were. Generous, thoughtful, deserving of beautiful things, even when life didn't provide them." My eyes moved to the next paragraph, where her handwriting seemed more hurried, as if she'd been fighting emotion while writing. "Do you remember our first date? We drove that old convertible along the coast road, and you kept pointing out architectural details of the bridges we passed. I pretended to understand, but really, I was just watching your face light up when you talked about things you loved. It was the happiest day of my life, and I knew then that I wanted to spend forever listening to your enthusiasms." The memory flooded back, Beverly's hair whipping in the Gulf breeze, her laughter mixing with the sound of waves and engine noise. We'd been so young then, so certain that happiness like that could last forever. "I bought this Ferrari 8 years ago," the letter continued, "after Giles made his first cruel comment about you at Joyce's engagement party. I realized then what kind of man our daughter had chosen, and I wanted to do something that would show him and you your true worth in my eyes." 8 years. She'd been planning this gesture for 8 years, maintaining the car, keeping the secret, waiting for the right moment. While I'd been living quietly with my dignity and my small pension, she'd been orchestrating this vindication. The color is Rosso Corsa, Ferrari racing red, like the sunset on our first drive together, when you pulled over just to watch the light change across the water. You said beautiful things should be experienced fully, never rushed. I hope this automobile will remind you of the good times, not the pain I caused you. I touched the dashboard, running my fingers across instruments that had been crafted with the same attention to detail I'd once brought to my architectural work. Beverly had chosen this car specifically for me, knowing I would appreciate its design, its engineering, its artistry. "Richard is gone now," she wrote, referencing her second husband who had died 2 years earlier. "He was never unkind, but he was never you either. He never understood why I kept boxes of your architectural drawings, or why I insisted on driving past houses you designed when we traveled around the city. Some loves leave marks that time can't erase." The page blurred momentarily, and I realized I was crying. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming recognition of love that had persisted despite betrayal, despite years of silence, despite the wall of hurt I'd built around my heart. I hope you will drive this car, Judson. Take those coastal routes we used to explore. Visit the old places where we were happy. Not to relive the past, but to remember that you deserve joy, adventure, and luxury. You always did, even when I was too foolish to see it clearly. The letter's final paragraph was signed with simple affection. All my love, always. Beverly. But there was a postscript that made me smile through my tears. P.S. The car is completely paid for, including insurance, taxes, and a maintenance account at Ferrari of Houston. Arnold has all the details. Now, go show Giles what junk looks like. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my jacket pocket, next to the garage key that had started this incredible journey. Through the windshield, I could see Houston continuing its busy afternoon, oblivious to the transformation taking place in this quiet corner of the industrial district. Beverly had given me more than a car. She'd given me vindication, restoration, and the knowledge that I had been loved more deeply than I'd ever realized. The Ferrari would carry me forward into whatever years remained, but her letter would carry the healing I hadn't known I needed. I reached for my phone and dialed Arnold's number, ready to begin the next chapter of a life that had just become far more interesting than anyone, especially Giles Barry, could have imagined. Mr. Arnold, now I understand why you asked me to call. My voice carried newfound confidence as I sat in the Ferrari's driver's seat, Beverly's letter safely tucked in my pocket. Mrs. Matthews hoped this would help heal old wounds, Arnold replied, and I could hear the satisfaction in his professional tone. She spent considerable time planning every detail of this bequest. The documentation is complete, the insurance transferred, and the maintenance account established. The car is entirely yours, Mr. Willis. Over the next 6 days, I researched my incredible inheritance thoroughly. Internet searches confirmed what I'd suspected. Ferrari 250 GT SWB models regularly sold at auction for between $3.5 and $4.2 million. This wasn't just a car. It was a museum-quality investment that appreciated faster than most stock portfolios. I kept the Discovery private, driving the Honda to and from daily errands while the Ferrari rested securely in its climate-controlled garage. There would be time for revelation, but Beverly had taught me the value of perfect timing. Sunday arrived with a traditional family dinner invitation from Joyce. This time, however, I had something special planned for the occasion. At precisely 5 o'clock, I pulled the Ferrari 250 GT SWB into Joyce's suburban driveway. The engine's distinctive V12 note announced my arrival with the authority that only Italian engineering can provide. Neighbors emerged from their houses, cell phones appearing to capture photos of the exotic machine that had materialized in their quiet residential street. Joyce opened her front door just as I was stepping out of the driver's seat, her expression shifting from greeting smile to complete bewilderment. "Dad? Whose car is that?" Behind her, Giles appeared in the doorway, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and growing shock as his brain processed what his eyes were seeing. Is that your car, Judson?" Giles's voice cracked slightly on the question. I locked the Ferrari with casual authority, enjoying the soft chirp of its security system. "Yes, this is part of the garage inheritance you were so curious about yesterday. Turns out Beverly left me something more valuable than rusty lawn equipment." Joyce stepped down from the porch, circling the car with obvious appreciation. "Dad, this is incredible, but why didn't you tell me? When did you get it?" "Sometimes the best surprises are worth keeping quiet," I replied, opening the hood to reveal the pristine V12 engine that commanded respect from automotive enthusiasts worldwide. "Your mother apparently purchased this 8 years ago and maintained it specifically for me." Giles remained frozen in the doorway, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something resembling shell shock. His mental calculator was clearly working overtime, trying to reconcile his dismissive comments about junk in an old shed with the reality of a multi-million-dollar classic Ferrari parked in his driveway. 8 years ago, Joyce touched the car's flawless paint with reverence. Mom never mentioned anything about buying a Ferrari. She kept many secrets, apparently, good ones, as it turns out. I handed Joyce the keys, watching her face light up with the same enthusiasm she'd shown as a child discovering Christmas presents. Would you like to sit in it? While Joyce explored the Ferrari's interior, marveling at the craftsmanship and vintage elegance, Giles finally found his voice. I had no idea Beverly owned anything like this. His words came out strained, careful, completely different from yesterday's mocking confidence. The garage seemed so ordinary, I suggested helpfully. Sometimes the most valuable things are hidden in plain sight. Beverly understood that lesson well. Joyce emerged from the driver's seat glowing with excitement. Dad, you have to take me for a drive sometime. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Of course, sweetheart. We can explore those coastal routes your mother and I used to drive when you were young. Giles cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, this certainly changes the inheritance picture, doesn't it? I mean, Joyce got the house, but this car must be worth more than the Miami property, I said quietly, watching his face carefully. Considerably more, according to recent auction results. Ferrari 250 GT SWB models are quite rare. Only 176 were ever produced. The number hit Giles like a physical blow. His complexion shifted to an unhealthy pallor as the full magnitude of his misjudgment became clear. The old beggar he'd humiliated on a Houston sidewalk was now worth several $1,000,000 more than he'd imagined possible. I think, Giles said slowly, obviously struggling with the words, I may have spoken too hastily yesterday. About the garage, I mean, and other things. Joyce looked between her husband and father, sensing the undercurrent of tension, but not understanding its source. What happened yesterday? Nothing that can't be forgiven, I replied, maintaining the dignity that had served me well throughout this entire experience. Family members sometimes say things they don't mean when emotions run high. As we walked into the house for dinner, I caught Giles looking back at the Ferrari with something approaching reverence. The transformation was remarkable. The condescending real estate broker had been replaced by a man forced to confront his own assumptions about value, worth, and the danger of underestimating quiet dignity. Joyce linked her arm through mine as we entered her kitchen. I'm so proud of you, Dad. Mom must have loved you very much to leave you something so special. Through the window, the Ferrari gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight, a testament to love that had transcended betrayal, time, and even death. Beverly's final gift had restored more than my financial security. It had returned my sense of worth and proven that some judgments about human value are spectacularly, satisfyingly wrong. Giles would never again mistake quiet dignity for poverty, or confuse humility with weakness, and I would never again doubt that I had been deeply, truly loved. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.